Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the DVD Lab. We are talking with the chair of the English department, Dr. Craig Jacobsen. We're talking a little bit about the opportunities that leadership are exploring in terms of what to bring back to campus and how to build more online instruction, what the outcomes and strategies of that are best for the student and the institution and the taxpayers that fund us, the local businesses that invest in a community college in hopes of finding some good talent to work in the business field. We talked a little bit about this Fordian assembly line type of education that if we're not careful, that's what it sort of becomes, this sort of just an assembly line of people that sign up, pay, and check boxes. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we still deliver a high quality learning experience for the student and for our faculty. But one of those things, before we can actually get to all of that, is this idea around the basic needs that students have when they come to our college. And I've said many times, I think when we hire people as recruiters and we send recruiters out into the community or to Indian nations, and we convince them that they need to come to Mesa Community College, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that their basic needs are met one way or another, either through grants or however we do that. And I think the fact of the matter is, for a lot of our students and the stories that we hear around faculty are just very basic needs. I'm talking hunger, I'm talking transportation, housing, and how are we doing with that? I know you've been very, very involved with making sure basic needs are made available.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, in the same context of all this developmental education transformation, there's a lot of research around this, that community college students in particular, but really college students in general, face a lot of struggles with these, like you said, housing, reliable transportation, food, childcare, employment, right? There's a list, right? And so I recall being at, I'm going to be vague here, but being at a large multi-college meeting, right? So it was a district-wide meeting with lots of people, and we were presenting some of this stuff and suggesting that these are barriers to enrollment, right? That one of the reasons we lose students isn't that they aren't capable of being successful in the classes they're in. It isn't because their instructors aren't doing all they can. It's that if those basic needs aren't met, then they just have no other choice, right? If you cannot find childcare that allows you to do your work, that allows you to come to campus, then that's going to take priority, right? So we spoke about that, and one person voiced a concern, which I think is a reflection of a long-standing concern, and their statement was, well, we're not a social service. And the reaction at one level was, well, but we can partner with social services, right? There are certainly groups and agencies out there that we can work with to help connect students to and other community members to. But there's also the reaction, well, yes, we are. We are a social service. We are a government entity funded by taxes, and the goal is to help students attain a college degree or certification or the coursework they need to improve. And, part of that is to help them be economically self-sufficient, to achieve what they want to achieve. But it's also, the flip side of that is that it's also, the community colleges are a huge economic engine for the Valley. And so helping students to be successful contributes to that as well. I'm firmly of the belief that doing the ethical thing is also almost always doing the practical thing. Right? So if you don't want to do it for the ethical reasons, that here's a 19-year-old who hasn't eaten in a day and a half, then maybe you do it because if this student is successful, they're going to contribute to the economy of the valley. I don't care which reason you do it for, but let's get this student some lunch.
That's right.
Right. So I think we're doing a just so much better job. Obviously, there's a need to continue with that, and I'm not sure how the COVID situation has impacted our ability to do all of the things that were in the planning stages and that we're just starting to be implemented. But I don't think we've lost sight of that. And I think that goes back to your original question about the vision. I think we are moving towards a different identity as a college. We understand ourselves a little bit differently, and that it includes some realization that we're not just here to provide information or instruction, or that it really is a more comprehensive interaction with the student that we need to have and plan for and have the resources for.
I didn't come back to being a full-time teacher till I was like 39, 40, and before that I owned my own businesses and all of that sort of stuff. And I still have some strong relationships with some business leaders in the valley here. And I've asked them, repeatedly, do you want the community college to serve as a place, a pool, for workers that come to work for you? And do you want them to have cultural intelligence? Do you want them to have critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, teamwork skills? Everybody says absolutely, and that's why we need a community college. That's why we support a community college, and we're happy to pay those taxes if, this is what's happening at the college, right? So transfer stuff, even though is 40% of our students who will go on to get a bachelor's degree or whatever, it's that time slot in there between the transfer that business leaders want, or expect people that come to the community college to learn. So with online, do you think those same kind of social skills can develop in a person who's, sitting at home in front of a computer for 3 hours a day taking a class online?
So, I think that even just in the last, what is it, 11 months we've been in quarantine. I don't know what it is now, but the last 6 months is that, I've already seen people adapt. And I'm not talking about teaching. I'm talking about as colleagues, workers, right? I'm in a lot of online meetings. People are better at that now than they were 6 months ago.
Sure.
Right? People are going to be better at it in 3 months than they are now. I'm not in any way prepared to judge the relative value of the different modalities, because we got a couple 100 years under our belts for one and a couple of months for another.
Yeah.
Right? And a couple of decades for the other. So I think we get better at things and we figure things out, like learning management systems. We use Canvas. Somebody was asking me, somebody who teaches at another institution was asking me about it. And I think it's time for another generation of learning management systems to emerge. They all get built around certain assumptions about what education is and what it's supposed to model online. And I think we're in another phase of that, not just because of live online and COVID, but because, we encode literally into those things the assumptions about how we think education works, right? What should be linear versus what's nonlinear, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And I've been teaching online in one form or another since the late 90s, and I'm always bumping into the constraints of whatever the system is, right? And it always lags behind other kinds of technology. I'm seeing it now in meeting technology, right? So I've been in Zoom meetings and WebEx meetings and Google Meets meetings, and they're all a little bit terrible in their own ways, right? Because they're built on assumptions about like let's model what it is to sit around a room in a or around a table in a conference room, right? So I think this is going to push a lot of our tools forward. I think this is going to push a lot of our experience and our imagination forward. So do I think they'll get the exact same social skills? No. But I think in the 21st century, you're going to need to learn how to build effective working and personal relationships with people you've never been in the same room with. Right? You mentioned very early on, you asked me about the Science Fiction Research Association, which is an international. I had colleagues who I didn't meet for years who I collaborated with on things because they were on a different continent, right? And when you do finally meet, that's a lot of fun, but you can work out particular kinds of very effective relationships that might even start as working relationships but become friendships. And I think that's a skill set that our students are going to need too, right? I'm aware that right now we're in a phase where we're relying on relationships that existed before we sort of went into, quarantine, isolation, lockdown, whatever you want to call it. And that's good, right? It's helpful and it shortcuts a lot of things when I'm working with somebody online who I've worked with a lot in person. But I'm also working very closely right now with someone who I've never met in person. We just never crossed paths and we started working on a project after this. But it feels like we have, right? And so I think it is both. I'm not an either or usually, unless, the or is terrible. I tend to be a both and I think a lot of our students want most of their classes to be face-to-face, especially if they're not in the areas where they're most comfortable. I think for a lot of them, they need some of them to be more flexible, so they need them to be online. So they might build a face-to-face schedule and then flesh it out a little bit with some online. And somewhere in between that is live online. I've offered the opinion in a couple of places that live online might dramatically affect evening on-campus class enrollment going forward. Because online classes we used to have really robust evening enrollment, and it's a fraction of what it once was. And I think that many of those students who would have come to the college after work instead went to online classes because it gave them flexibility. But I think that some of those would like the idea of going home after work and maybe having dinner with their family and then sitting down for a live online class where you get a little bit of both, right? So I'm just guessing. I have no data to base that on, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if longer term evening scheduled live online classes wouldn't be a great option for some people that gives them a little bit of both. So I think it's another tool in our tool bag, and we're all going to have to get good at it, or at least okay at it, but like anything else, people will gravitate towards the thing that that is closest to their affinities, that they feel excited about. And so, some people are already, like you said yourself, you like the live online better than the asynchronous, and some people feel the other way, and that's just the reality. We have another option for students.
Well, I totally agree with everything. I think balance, and we should use everything in our, as you say, our toolbox or tool belt. I love the idea of the hybrid now that I have been, teaching online. I think there is a really good reason to meet people face to face, and I think there's a really good reason to take care of business online. I just did a couple of keynote talks in Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, right? Sitting in my house. And I've got to meet these colleagues from all over England and Australia. You know, we spent 2 hours together, and it was absolutely amazing, right? But I'm not an 18-year-old kid that needs to learn how to socialize either. You know, I'm pretty much antisocial anyway, so there I am, you know. I mean that in a good way too.
That's funny. I just described you as gregarious the other day.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, you know, I've been teaching all this time. I still get nervous, you know, when I walk in front of a class, you know. I had a guy tell me when that goes away, you probably ought to stop teaching. But so, you know, I love the idea of the balance. And I'll tell you, as the teacher, I'm always going to be an advocate for students. I'm always going to be an advocate for the minority student. I'm always going to be an advocate for first generation. I'm always going to be an advocate for those students who come from the neighborhoods that I came from, you know, first generation or low income, hardworking low income, by the way, I want to say that. Always. And, you know, it was sort of weird this week. I had students just in the middle of our class just kind of decide to, you know, just express themselves. So they were talking about other classes, which I, in the face-to-face, I never get into with my students, right? Because I don't know the whole story. But it's that idea of how they're talking with each other about how in an internet classroom, live online lecture, that it starts to always come down to the 2 or 3 people that start to dominate the time. Then that other people want to ask questions, but they're afraid to because they don't want to sound like they don't know, right? And so this whole new cultural environment around that. And what I worry about is the students that are going to get left behind in that process. So when I'm in here with my students, you know, they're working on all the computers, and I have students all the time, very quiet, introverted, very smart, need a little help. And I can go down there and sit with them, and we can work together. And I find that as an educator very, very rewarding. Now what I do is whenever I'm done with my lecture, I've also learned, and Mike Calloway talked about this in his article about time management. So when I'm done, I now do either small group or individual tutoring online, right? So, okay, 40 minutes a lecture, that's enough out of anybody, right? Or 30 minutes. And then, okay, now I do workshops online. I find that so rewarding, you know, but you have to watch out for FERPA laws, you know, because we're not supposed to, one student's not supposed to see a mark on another student's paper, right? So there has to be the skill set along with teaching online. But I also learned early on the mistake I made is I tried to recreate face-to-face online, and you can't do that. There's very, very similarities, but like you said, it is an exciting challenge in many ways, but I still want to make sure when those students express they want to be face-to-face, they want to be, that I'm always going to be an advocate for the minority voice, you know. That's just the way it goes, you know.
It's a good way for it to go.
Yeah, we have to have. But I really like that, you know. When we start, I get excited when people talk about balance.
Yeah,
common sense, you know, being reasonable, being empathetic. You know, it's not like you say, or you know, it's not one way or the other. But I think intelligent people and the people that are like us that get paid to be here, we should take those variables, right, and deconstruct them and run them down as fine as we can to get to a result. And that takes special people too, right, who know how to do that without getting caught up in the taken side thing. But, you know, like real intelligence, you know, there isn't anything better than that, right?
It does. And it's, some of it is, you know, I know for me, it's developing the habits of doing that, of digging down. And I give you one, like, really boring example, but it's recent, so it's in my mind. And that is like, so of course, at the beginning of the semester, everybody's looking at enrollment numbers, right? And I'm getting enrollment figures and seeing these dashboards about enrollment. And I'm seeing numbers.
Dashboards.
Yeah. It's one of those words that we're now using completely differently. Right?
Well, I associate it with Excel sheets. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So, no, you're fine. And so, I'm seeing what the college as a whole numbers are. And then I'm seeing the English department numbers. And the English department numbers are down worse than the college is, which is really unusual for us because first-year composition is so closely tied to enrollment. So we usually track really closely. So I thought, well, that's weird, right? And I noticed that it didn't change. So I started trying to dig down a little bit. And, once you start disaggregating the numbers, what I discovered was that almost all of that discrepancy was in English 101 enrollment. It wasn't a department-wide downturn in enrollment. It was almost entirely coming out of what normal English 101 enrollment would look like, which makes sense given where we are. It's it's students who
we're going to wait.
Yeah, the students who graduated high school and instead of coming to community college, they were going to wait, and so they didn't take English 101 that first semester, and so But I was talking to a colleague at another college, and we were all sort of sharing our enrollment stories. And I mentioned this, and we were in a video meeting, so I watched him turn his head to his other monitor and go check that dashboard for his department. He came back and said, "What do you know? That is exactly the same for us, right?" And the only difference is that I'm starting to develop the habit of burrowing down. And he had just stayed at the large scale numbers and was left wondering, well, I wonder why that is, right? And so I've made this joke a million times, so apologies to people who've heard it, but my PhD is in American literature, where data is underlining a quote in a novel, right? And so I've had to develop whatever habits about looking at numbers and things, and so I'm still learning that stuff a lot. But that's one of the things is you got to dig down. You got to try to triangulate, look at what the story is from multiple ways, and really then that just tells you, what can you do about it? So does 101 enrollment down in the fall mean 102 enrollment's going to be down in the spring? And what should I do about that when I build the schedule? And, so it all gets way more complicated because it doesn't tell you something. I'm making air quotes for those of you at home. It doesn't tell you anything. It suggests things, right? And you have to be careful thinking that it's telling you things.
And it triggers all kinds of behaviors from people, in my opinion, that, probably are lacking a little bit in education cycle, of understanding the bigger picture of what education is and how it moves, the rhythm of it, because as soon as, we're down, and again, I always say down from what, So, in this conversation about enrollment down because of 101, because students said, I'm going to sit a semester out. But then someone sees the data and they're like, oh, we're down, but doesn't understand the variable. That's scary. That's when bureaucracy becomes, a problem, because we should always be talking instead of, we're down this semester, right? Because we're going to compare fall 2020 with 2021, and then we're going to say we're up or down, whatever. Whenever it's down, people are so quick to make cuts. When the fact is, if you were running a real business and you saw you were down, you would make investments to bring that number back up. And I think that's why we need a longer cycles, 3 years, 5-year budget plans, so that, there's some stability. And these, to me, are just, common sense types of stuff, But for long as I've been here, we react every 2 semesters. We're up, we're down, we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. And I think we need to modernize that as well. Look at different ways of funding that stabilize, our college. So chairs like yourself, you're not I mean, I understand scheduling is reactionary and fluid with the rhythm, but I think if you look at the numbers in longer periods of time, I think you could find a better way of scheduling, because we want stability both for our students and the morale of our faculty.
Absolutely.
Our final thoughts, Craig. I want to talk about just, you got a magic wand, right? What do you want for Mesa Community College in the next 5 years?
What do I want?
Yeah. What do you see?
Oh, wow. Magic wand. I'm mad with power.
No money, like forget money, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
no, that wouldn't even be in my top 5. Well, maybe not my top 3. I think the biggest thing I want, and I think I have a reasonable expectation for seeing this, is just a demonstrated commitment that doesn't waver to what we say we value. Because I think what we say we value is all the things I would hope. And so I believe we're genuine, both individually and collectively, when we express those. But I also know that external pressures can lead us to deprioritize things. And I don't want us to I worry sometimes that we get into a crisis mindset. And I said earlier that I was glad to see a lot of people are already thinking beyond that moment. And so I think I'm going to get my magic wand wish here. But I hope we stay with that and we don't get too pulled off of that trajectory by the inevitable small and large crises that we're going to have to face. There's a lot still to figure out in this. There's a lot to figure out in getting back to whatever the new normal will be. And I recognize that, but I don't want us to so deprioritize some of the things that we've identified as important that they get pushed from, 2 or 3 years out to 5 years out. And then, I don't want us to kick those cans down the road too far.
Yeah. Well, another reason why we should have good centrist practice, so as people change, the mission stays the course. I think that is, especially here at Mesa, we've had such an interim leadership culture for so long, and when people leave, ideas leave, and we need to make sure we really lock down the things that, we're committed to. And again, I think that 5 to 10 year, 3 to 5 would be very, very helpful. I want us to be a place that it felt like when I came here 20 years ago. I left a corner office up at UC Davis to come here because the vibe was so positive. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be a part of what was happening. This idea of innovation, creativity, and delivering really high level, academic studies. That really attracted me, And that's what I want for us in the future. I want us to be a destination for people who really take learning serious and make that creative and innovative and modernizing all of this work. We've been the leader across the country before. I don't know where we're at these days, but that's what I want us to be. I want us to deliver the absolute best education that Arizona can get right here at Mesa Community College, and we're going to keep working to that end. We really appreciate you taking your time to visit with us. I know that you're very, very busy on multiple fronts, and we really, again, appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.